The morning they sent me home, I was sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, tying my shoes slowly because the room was still spinning a little. My daughter-in-law stood by the door with her arms crossed and said, very plainly, "You should know better. This trip was never meant for someone like you." I nodded once. I didn't argue. I didn't ask what she meant by someone like you. I just reached for my bag. What they didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that every reservation on that trip had been paid for with my card. Or that there was already a real estate agent waiting for my call back home. Or that a folder with ownership documents was sitting quietly in my suitcase, between a sweater and a paperback I hadn't finished. I picked up my phone, turned the screen face down, and waited. I'm Margaret. I turned 69 last fall. At the end of the year before that, my husband passed away after a short, aggressive cancer. We had been married for over 40 years. By the time the doctors gave us a timeline, he was already thinking about practical things. Too practical, maybe. One evening, while the house was quiet except for the heater clicking on and off, he asked our oldest son, Daniel, to take care of me if anything happened. Not emotionally, logistically. Living arrangements, meals, the ordinary details people forget to plan for. I told my husband I was still healthy. I could manage on my own. He shook his head. He had always been like that. Once he decided something was necessary, there was no moving him. Daniel agreed. Not warmly, just dutifully. Originally, my husband and I had lived in a detached home in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus. Years earlier, when Daniel got married and his income was unstable, we moved into a small one-bedroom condo nearby and let Daniel's family take the house. It had been fully renovated back then. New floors, fresh paint. It smelled like cut wood and clean air. After that, I rarely went inside. I didn't want to intrude. I assumed my daughter-in-law Laura preferred distance, so when I moved in after my husband's funeral, I brought very little. 2 suitcases, a carry-on, mostly clothes and paperwork. Daniel opened the door and blinked when he saw me. Oh, was today the day? He had always been forgetful. Even then, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. The house felt wrong as soon as I stepped inside. Shoes piled near the entrance. A sour smell I couldn't place at first. The lights were on, but the rooms felt dim, like the air itself was tired. Laura didn't stand up from the couch. "There's no extra bed," she said. "You'll need to make space." Daniel rubbed his forehead and added, "Dad wanted this, but honestly, there's not much room." I nodded and carried my suitcase inside. The living area was filled with shopping bags and half-open boxes. The floor was sticky under my socks. I recognized the house by its shape, but not by its condition. It reminded me of the hoarding shows I used to flip past on TV. I didn't say anything. That first night, I slept on the floor, surrounded by my luggage, listening to the sound of people moving upstairs. Laughter. A drawer slamming. The TV turning off. I stared at the ceiling and told myself this was temporary. I told myself to be useful. I told myself to stay quiet. In the morning, I woke before everyone else, folded my blanket, and stood there for a long time, trying to decide where to begin. Then, I started cleaning, and that was how my days quietly rearranged themselves. One bag, one dish, one small decision at a time, without me realizing how much of myself I was putting away. That afternoon, while sorting a stack of unopened mail, I found something that made me pause. I didn't open it. I just said it. By the end of the first week, the house had a rhythm. Not a healthy one, but a predictable one. Daniel left early and came back late. He ran his own small logistics business and was always between contracts. Laura managed a beauty salon across town. She wore clean, pressed clothes every day and made sure the children did too. From the outside, they looked put together. Inside was another story. The kitchen counters were layered with things instead of surfaces. Receipts, plastic containers without lids, appliances that worked but were never wiped down. The trash bins filled faster than they were emptied. When I asked before throwing anything away, Laura waved her hand without looking.
"It's fine, just toss it." So I did. I moved carefully. I lined things up. I worked in sections. I didn't touch drawers that weren't mine. I didn't open closed boxes. I treated the house like it belonged to someone I needed to stay on good terms with. The children noticed first. One afternoon, the youngest rolled across the living room carpet and laughed. "It looks like a TV house now," she said. They stopped leaving food on the floor. They asked where things went instead of dropping them. No one thanked me, but that wasn't why I was doing it. Meals were another matter. Dinner was usually meat and bread. Sometimes just that. No vegetables, no soup. No fruit unless it came in a lunchbox from school. After a few weeks, I suggested making a simple stew. Something warm. Something with carrots. Laura didn't raise her voice. She just said, "If you want that, buy the ingredients yourself." After that, she stopped cooking entirely. So I did. The children ate quietly at first, then eagerly. Their color improved. Their energy did too. They started sitting near me, asking for small adjustments, an egg on top, extra rice, more apples. At night, one of them climbed into my bed and fell asleep without asking. Then another did the next week. Eventually, it became normal. Laura pretended not to notice, or maybe she noticed and chose not to say anything. About a month in, I overheard something I wasn't meant to. I had gotten up to use the bathroom late at night. Daniel and Laura were in the living room drinking. Their voices were loose, careless. "She acts like she owns the place," Laura said. Daniel sighed. "I wouldn't have agreed if Dad hadn't pushed it." I stood still in the hallway. The light from the kitchen barely reached me. "No one asked her to clean," Laura continued. "She does it, then acts offended when no one reacts." Daniel didn't disagree. I went back to my room without making a sound and sat on the floor for a while. My suitcase was still half packed. I had never fully unpacked. I think part of me knew not to. That night, I stopped expecting appreciation. I focused on order, on routine, on keeping the children fed and the house functional. 6 months passed like that. When summer came, Daniel and Laura started talking about a family trip. Brochures appeared on the table. Tabs stayed open on the computer. I assumed I wasn't included and felt an unexpected sense of relief. Then the oldest child said, "Grandma's coming too, right?" They hesitated, looked at each other, eventually agreed. Laura handed me a list. Breakfast boxes, laundry. "Since you're coming," she said, "it's the least you can do." I nodded. The morning of the trip started before sunrise. I packed food, washed clothes, made sure everything was labeled. By the time we got on the road, I was already tired. I needed restroom breaks more often than they liked. Daniel frowned at the clock. Laura sighed. The children grew quiet. At the amusement park, I told them I'd sit at a cafe, that I was fine. The children ran off happily. Laura came back once to remind me to pay my own expenses. The cafe filled quickly. The air was thick. I stepped outside and sat on a bench instead. The sun was stronger than I expected. The next thing I remember clearly was a white ceiling and someone asking me questions I couldn't answer right away. Later, in the medical room, I heard a doctor scolding Daniel and Laura. "You can't leave an older person alone like that," he said. "She had heat exhaustion." They decided to go back to the hotel early. In the room, Daniel said, "Please don't cause any more trouble." I lay down, stared at the ceiling, and felt something settle inside me. That evening, as the light faded, I realized I had been very clear about everyone else's needs. I hadn't been clear about my own, and once that thought arrived, it didn't leave. I closed my eyes and waited. I woke up around dusk. The room was quiet in a way hotel rooms usually aren't. No hallway noise, no television from the next room. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the weight of my own thoughts settling in. Someone knocked softly. The door opened and the oldest grandchild peeked in. "Grandma, are you okay?" Behind them, Laura stood in the hallway. Her expression was different, tighter, less certain. She stepped inside and closed the door partway. "Daniel and I need to talk to you," she said. "The kids will stay with their parents for a bit." When the door shut again, the room felt smaller. "You should know your place," Laura said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "This trip is a luxury. You don't really belong here." I sat up slowly. She continued, "It would be better if you went home early. You're good at cleaning. That's where you're useful." Daniel stood near the window, arms crossed. He didn't look at me. I asked one question, calmly. "You want me to take the train home? Tonight?" Daniel finally turned. "What else did you expect?" he said. "We only took you in because of Dad. Don't think you get a free vacation." That was the moment something finished forming. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. I didn't respond right away. I reached for my bag instead, folded my clothes carefully, put my toiletries back where they belonged. The room was very quiet. At the front desk, I asked them to call a taxi. The driver looked at the address and hesitated. "That's a long ride," he said. I showed him my card. "That's fine." He nodded and drove. The children watched me leave from the lobby. I smiled, told them to have fun, and didn't explain. They waved. Children accept things adults complicate. When I got home, I didn't go to bed. I cleaned. Not out of habit, out of intention. By morning, I had already made my decision. The condo we had moved into years ago was still vacant. I called the real estate agent and asked about availability. Then I asked another question. What would it take to list the house? A week later, Daniel called me furious. An agent had come to evaluate the property. I went back to the house in the afternoon. The same house I hadn't really lived in for years. Daniel and Laura were waiting. "I've decided to sell," I said, "and I'm stepping back from supporting you." They stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "This was Dad's house," Daniel said. "I inherit it." I asked him something simple. "Do you remember transferring ownership?" He didn't answer. "It's still in my name," I said. "Always was." Laura's face went pale. "And the monthly transfers," I continued. "Those are stopping too." Daniel blinked. "What transfers?" I took a folder from my bag and set it on the table. Not dramatically, just flat, neat. "I've been funding your business," I said. "Through my asset company." Silence. Daniel looked at Laura. "I thought that was your income." Laura looked back at him. "You said you were earning it." I watched them process it in real time. "I didn't correct you," I said, "because I didn't think I needed to." That was the first time they saw me differently. Not as help, not as background, but as the person holding the structure together. I stood, picked up my bag, and walked to the door. Behind me, voices rose. Confusion, accusations, panic. I didn't turn around. Outside, the air felt clear. I took a breath, unlocked my car, and drove away. That evening, back in the condo, I opened my laptop and began organizing documents, dates, accounts, ownership records, step by step. Then I closed the folder, placed it beside the phone, and waited. I didn't rush. The next few days were quiet by design. I moved into the condo fully, changed the locks, set up my own routines again. Morning tea, a short walk, sorting papers in the afternoon while the light was still good. I worked the way I always had, methodically. First, I separated personal property from shared history, accounts in my name only, the asset management company I had set up years earlier, transfer records, monthly statements, tax filings. Everything was already there. I didn't need to create anything new. I just needed to put it in order. Second, I made calls. One to the real estate agent, one to my accountant, one to the bank. Each conversation was brief, professional, no emotion required. Third, I stopped speaking unless there was a reason. Daniel called twice that week. I didn't answer. Laura sent a long message. I didn't reply. Silence wasn't avoidance. It was a boundary. On Friday afternoon, I received a notification from the bank confirming the final transfer cancellation. Automatic funding to Daniel's business account had ended. Cleanly. Properly. That evening, my accountant emailed me a summary. Nothing surprising. Just confirmation that everything was aligned with the records. I printed it and placed it in the folder. The following Monday, the real estate agent called. "We have a buyer," she said. "Cash offer, no contingencies." I asked one question. "Timeline?" "2 weeks," she replied. I agreed. When Daniel showed up at the condo unannounced that night, I was eating dinner. Soup and bread. Quiet. Simple. He stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. "You can't just do this," he said. His voice wasn't angry yet, just unsettled. "I can," I replied. "And I am." He paced once, then stopped. "That business. Things are tight. You know that." I nodded. "That's why I structured it the way I did." He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but there was nothing obvious to push against. Laura didn't come that night. She came the next day. She sat very straight on the edge of the chair. "What about the kids?" she asked. "I'm thinking about them," I said. "That's why I'm being clear." She pressed her lips together. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm stepping back." There was a difference. I didn't explain it further. A week later, the house officially went under contract. Daniel's business accounts were frozen soon after. Without the monthly transfers, expenses caught up quickly. Vendors stopped extending credit. A loan application was denied. None of this surprised me. When the calls became more frantic, I answered one. "I need you to listen," I told Daniel. "Not react. Just listen." He went quiet. "I'm not your safety net," I said. "I was your runway, and that ended." He didn't respond. "I'll speak with you again," I added, "when it's about the children, not money, not blame." Then I ended the call. That night, I sat at the small kitchen table and folded laundry. The condo smelled like detergent and tea. The clock ticked steadily. Everything was in motion now. Processes had started, timelines were set. I wasn't angry. I was done managing things that weren't mine to carry. I put the last folded shirt away, turned off the light, and went to bed knowing the next conversation would be the final one, and that it would need to be calm. The meeting happened in the realtor's office. Neutral ground, clean desks, a pot of coffee no one touched. Daniel and Laura sat across from me. They looked tired in different ways. Daniel kept rubbing his hands together. Laura sat very still, her jaw set, like she was holding something in place. I had the folder with me. The same one. Nothing new inside it. The agent excused herself after introductions and closed the door. No one spoke right away. Then Laura said, "You're destroying our family." I didn't respond to that. Instead, I opened the folder and slid one document across the table. Property ownership. My name. Dated years back. "This is why the sale is legal," I said. Daniel stared at it longer than he needed to. "But Dad," he started. "Never transferred it," I finished, "because it was never his to transfer." I placed the next document down. Business funding agreement, clear terms, monthly transfers, my company's name at the top. "I set this up because you couldn't get a loan," I said. "It was structured as investment support, not income." Laura leaned forward. "So all that money was not salary," I said, "and not a gift." Daniel's face changed then. Not anger, something closer to fear. "I thought it was Laura's income," he said quietly. Laura turned to him. "You told me you were earning it." Neither of them looked at me. I waited. When they finally did, I said, "This isn't a conversation about who misunderstood whom. It's about responsibility." Laura's voice sharpened. And the kids? You're just going to walk away? No, I said. I'm going to be clear. I folded my hands on the table. I will help raise them, I said. I will not finance either of you. Daniel shook his head. You can't just decide that. I already did, I replied, when you sent me home. Silence settled again. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Laura stood abruptly. You think this makes you some kind of authority? I met her eyes. No, I said. It makes me the person who owns the house, funded the business, and paid for the trip you told me I didn't belong on. Her shoulders dropped slightly, just a fraction. The agent knocked and re-entered. Papers were signed, timelines confirmed. Outside, Daniel followed me to my car. What are we supposed to do now? He asked. I answered honestly. Handle your lives. He didn't stop me when I opened the door. 2 weeks later, the sale closed. 3 weeks after that, Daniel's business filed for bankruptcy. The divorce paperwork came soon after. Neither of them wanted full custody. Too complicated. Too expensive. The children came to live with me quietly, 1 suitcase each. No court drama, no speeches, just paperwork, signatures, a new routine. That first night, we ate soup together at the small table. The youngest helped dry the dishes. The oldest asked how to cook rice properly. I showed them. There were no raised voices in the condo, no chaos, just learning and structure. That was when I knew the confrontation had ended exactly where it needed to. Not with an argument, but with responsibility changing hands. Life settled faster than I expected. Children adapt when rules are clear. They don't argue with structure the way adults do. They observe it, test it once or twice, then adjust. The oldest learned to cook simple meals first: rice, eggs, soup. I stood beside them at the stove, not correcting unless something would burn. They wrote steps on a piece of scrap paper and taped it to the fridge. The middle one took over cleaning without being asked. Floors on Tuesdays, trash every night. They liked crossing things off lists. The youngest organized everything, shoes lined up, bags hung properly. They reminded the others gently, the way I had learned to do over the years. I didn't praise excessively, I didn't criticize either. We just worked. School mornings became predictable. Breakfast at the same time, dishes done together, lights out on schedule. The condo stayed quiet in the evenings, filled with the sound of pages turning or pencils moving across paper. Daniel called once after the divorce was finalized. His voice was flat. I didn't think it would end like this, he said. I know, I replied. He paused. I don't know where Laura is. I hope she's safe, I said, and I meant it. That was the last conversation we had. The legal matters concluded cleanly. Custody documents were filed, accounts were closed. The asset company returned to dormancy, its work finished. The house funds were transferred into long-term savings for the children's education and basic security. Nothing extravagant, just stable. One afternoon, months later, I found the same unopened envelope I had set aside on my first week in Daniel's house. I finally opened it. It was a routine notice. Nothing urgent. Nothing dramatic. I smiled at myself for waiting so long. What mattered wasn't what was inside. It was that I had trusted my instincts enough to pause. Sometimes resolution isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, disguised as routine. That evening, after dinner, the children sat at the table doing homework. The window was open. The air moved gently through the room. I made tea and watched the steam rise. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't managing anyone else's life. I was simply present. And that was enough. I rinsed my cup, turned off the kitchen light, and stood for a moment in the hallway, listening to the calm. Then I went to bed, knowing this chapter had truly closed. These days, my mornings are quiet. I wake up before the children, make tea, and stand by the window while the city comes online. Buses start their routes. Someone always walks a dog past the corner at the same time. The world keeps its own schedule whether we're ready or not. The children wake gradually, No rushing, no shouting. Breakfast is simple. Everyone knows their role. Someone sets the table. Someone checks backpacks. Someone reminds me where I put my glasses. In the evenings, we clean together without discussion. It's not punishment. It's just how a household works when no one is pretending. Sometimes after dinner, we sit quietly. Reading, drawing, doing nothing in particular. Peace doesn't require entertainment. I don't hear from Daniel anymore. I don't wonder where Laura went. Some answers arrive only when you stop asking. What I do notice is how steady things feel now. How ownership of space, of time, of responsibility creates calm instead of conflict. Not long ago, a neighbor asked if I could help her review some paperwork. She said she felt overwhelmed and unsure who was really in charge of her affairs. I told her to bring everything over. We'd take it one step at a time. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you for listening quietly. If it reminded you of someone you know, or maybe even yourself, you're not alone. Before you go, take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps this space stay calm and welcoming. And if you feel like it, leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I read them more than you might think. 2 more stories will appear next, both about ordinary people who realized very calmly that they needed to take their lives back. I'll see you there.